Welcome back, Cadaver Crew.
What's up?
We're ready.
We're going to talk about more chest tubes, specifically in Vietnam.
I'm ready. All right. Welcome, Cadaver Crew.
Get your dark little minds right and settle in.
Class is in session. The cadaver is already on the table.
I'm Bede.
And I'm Sam.
And this is the Cadaver's Files.
Wow, you're really crushing it today.
I know.
Okay, let's go.
Finally got this intro on lock.
No, you still read it, but that's okay.
Yep. Probably going to read it forever.
Okay.
So just deal with it.
Okay.
So let's remember back on why chest tubes matter.
They save lives. Let's start there.
So in war, chest trauma is very common. You have any kind of shrapnel, debris, or flying objects. Back in the day, could have been a lance, a sword, but nowadays we're talking about projectiles.
Mm-hmm.
Projectiles that move very, very fast. Plus blast injuries, any kind of IED or anything like that. And the shrapnel or whatever was inside that IED could also be used as projectiles. So if you put nails inside, that's a projectile that's going to fly out of there and possibly hit you in the chest.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, especially in Vietnam. Remember, in Vietnam was really the spur of guerrilla warfare and much more than we had seen in the past. And that is another very interesting change in warfare history and why we're seeing so many more injuries, because people are surprised. It's not like your typical moving fronts this way and that way. It's like a lot more sneaking around and getting behind lines and things like that. So
yeah.
Effective pleural drainage, removing the air and blood from the chest cavity, was often the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
In these situations. The Vietnam War marked the moment chest tubes, especially with innovative valves, became standard care for battlefield thoracic injuries. So it took this long. But like we said in our previous episode, that's probably due to the scientific advancements, including understanding pressure valves and how to keep the function of the respiratory system while also removing fluid and things like that. So even though our focus is on Vietnam, quick reminder from where chest tubes came from. Ancient and Middle Ages, Hippocrates, our guy, had some early drainage techniques.
Always around.
But mostly that was for removing pus. The methods were rudimentary and dangerous, and people generally didn't survive.
I mean, yeah, but they also weren't on antibiotics for their purulent ball of pus. So.
Ball of pus. In the 19th century, we finally saw the water-sealed drainage systems. The first effective closed systems were developed by surgeons like Playfair and Bulla, which prevented air from re-entering the pleural space and reduced infection. So early in the 20th century, war was a catalyst, but as we talked about last time, it kind of took longer than we would want. For this advancement to have. In World War I, the mortality of chest wounds was extremely high. Drainage methods helped, but still lacked consistent success. World War II, thoracotomy, the surgical opening of the chest, and tube drainage were used to restore lung function, but standard protocols were still being developed. So there was no we're going to do it this way every single time, and so it delayed.
While I want to accept that as a reason, tell me when anyone has ever cared in war about standard protocols.
Oh, we use standard procedures all the time.
Really?
Yes, they're literally called SOPs.
But do you get what I'm saying? Typically in war, people are like, F the protocol, like, he's dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was just a knowledge gap. In the Korean War, experience had improved survival and broader use of chest tubes began to solidify. The mortality rates dropped compared to earlier conflicts. That's where we talked about that 1%. But in the Vietnam War, this was where things really turned around.
Yeah. When was the Vietnam War?
It was in 1955, and it ran consecutively for 20 years. I think there was even conflict before that. I think we were engaged in some way or another for around 30 years.
That's a long time and a lot of resources.
Yeah, a long one. Mm-hmm. So you can see where the development of some of these medical devices and practices would catch up, because, I mean, when you're at war for that long,
something's got to give.
Got to come by. So by the Vietnam War era, tube thoracostomy had become widely recognized as an effective treatment for penetrating chest trauma, hemothorax, and pneumothorax. Reports from surgeons treating thoracic injuries in Vietnam showed substantially improved survival rates with the routine use of chest tubes. So we're all good here. But why did thoracostomy rule the day? Mortality from chest trauma continued to fall thanks to better logistics. So think about helicopter evacuation.
Yeah, big difference.
Yep. And standardized surgical approaches. So surgical textbooks and trauma surgeons agreed that closed tube thoracostomy rather than repeated open surgery was effective for most injuries.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So your medical writings are catching up. Plus, you have better logistics, better surgical supplies.
And let's talk about, once again, the resources. If we're having to do multiple surgeries over and over and over, that's not ideal for how often people are getting injured in the war and injured just in like typical day-to-day lives. The resources that takes is insane compared to just placing a chest tube and observing that chest tube.
Right. So let's talk about the Heimlich valve.
Not to be confused with the Heimlich maneuver.
Same person.
Yes.
Yes. So this was one of the most important innovations in chest drainage, and it occurred during the war. So Dr. Henry Heimlich designed the unidirectional valve, later called the Heimlich valve, that allowed air and fluid to leave the chest but not re-enter without the bulky water seal bottles. So the small valve was sterile, disposable, portable, ideal for combat conditions where suction units and heavy drainage bottles were impractical. It allowed wounded soldiers to be more mobile, which was important for evacuation and recovery. So let's talk about who used some of these things and the important people in this, the backbone of
the backbone of healthcare is always
healthcare.
Nurses. So
exactly. So let's talk about some nurses. So the first American military hospital was established in 1962, and the number of military personnel and nurses grew steadily until the war was halted in the 70s. So initially, female military personnel were supposed to be in country only. Like, of course, obviously, stay home, but like stay here, but help, But the need for nurses outranked the number of male nurses available.
Yeah.
So there just wasn't enough male nurses to go around. Plus, if you were able-bodied male, you probably weren't getting branched into nursing. You were getting branched into infantry or armor or things like that. So you weren't going to be in there. You're going to be somewhere else. In the end, over 250,000 women had served in this war.
Yeah.
11,500 whom actually served in Vietnam. So like were in Vietnam. And then women worked as clerks, map makers, intelligence specialists, photographers, air traffic controllers for the Red Cross and USO volunteers.
That's so many people. Imagine if we didn't allow these women to come into the war, the depleted resources, 250,000.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes.
The largest number of women in uniform were nurses, sent to care for soldiers and civilians in hospital beds.
Perfect.
These nurses, this is brutal. These nurses would have 12-month tours.
12 months.
A year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And their responsibilities took them from ground, sea, or air, depending on the branch they served with.
Wow.
So they could be on boats and serving at sea with the Navy, doing nursing duties. They could be on the ground in Vietnam. They could be transportation nurses going through air. So what we're going to see is a lot of like casualty transportation, and there was nurses on those flights. So which we still do.
Yeah, there's
today.
still flight nurses. If you're being transferred from one facility to another, there's not a provider on that flight with you. It's our nursing team, and they're badasses.
Yeah, it's a highly coveted position, and it's like so cool. So these nurses were a key reason on why airlifting patients became possible. So usually on a C-141, big airplane, there were 3 nurses and 3 med techs, with sometimes over 90 patients to keep alive on these flights.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were like stuffing people in.
Yeah.
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 So here's a quote from a flight nurse that I have. We had to be very aware of what was happening with our patients. Some patients had abdominal wounds. The wounds were never sutured but were open because high altitude changed body cavity pressures and would have disrupted sutures.
Wow.
The Heimlich valve on the chest tubes was developed during the Vietnam War in order to allow patients with chest tubes to fly without wreaking havoc with chest pressures. You couldn't have glass bottles or any kind of bottle attached to the chest tube if you were flying. The Heimlich valve was a one-way valve that allowed the air out of the chest with the change of air pressure and high altitude, but didn't allow anything else to get sucked back in. As we flew, any air trapped in the cavity could cause a problem. That's why we couldn't have a lot of wounds that were sutured very tight.
Yeah. I mean, you don't think about it, but it's a completely different pressure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that crazy to think about?
It is. And it affects more than just chest tubes. We're talking about just abdominal injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really good article, and we'll put it in our show notes and link it. But it's a really good article website that does a whole tribute to Vietnam nurses specifically. And there's some stuff in there that people probably don't even think about.
Yeah.
A lot of nurses after their tours in Vietnam, it was like 50-50. 50% of them were like, this is needed. I need to be a nurse. I need to help people. It like solidified that in them. And then 50% never touched the profession again.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
Totally get it. I mean, I know my professionals so need it, and there are days I never want to walk back into the ER again after a shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I get
hard.
it. It's hard.
Also, they weren't just dealing with physical wounds here. They were also dealing with soldiers coming back with PTSD and having to keep those patients that were also being airlifted steady. So you're talking about like triggering trauma, airlifting someone with PTSD.
With 85 people all around you dying.
Right. With also, they're probably ambulatory so they can walk around. And then you have your litter patients that are literally laying down in this airplane, and you're trying to keep them alive. And so another thing that was really prominent in that article was like these nurses had to be so skilled in taking vital signs and keeping records. And they were essentially keeping these patients alive.
Yes. 100%.
So if there was an emergency that happened in flight, like they had to handle it.
Yeah. Nobody was coming up in the air to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they really prided themselves, this group specifically that the article talked about, prided themselves on ensuring that every patient they had made it from takeoff to landing.
Yeah.
Like the keeping them alive.
That's so cool. And then it's so cool to know that our flight nurses now take care of our most critical patients. Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It is.
They also went to flight school. Those nurses specifically were like, we're not doing it unless we get to go to flight school.
Yeah.
Because in flight school, you learn all about altitude and pressure and all of those things. And they were essentially part of the flight crew.
Yeah.
But they also held all their medical knowledge.
Yeah.
And I also think about, I don't think people like understand how hard that is. But if you're talking about this C-141, right? Like it is so loud. So loud. It's vibrating and shaking. And so you're trying to like listen to people, take their blood pressure, take like anything like that.
And let's remember, you have to hear the heartbeat to take a blood pressure.
Right. It's soft.
I mean, the heartbeat, the pulse.
The pulse, yeah. But it can be like you're waiting for it to go away, and you could like have to listen so closely and being able to hear with their stethoscopes on and like all that kind of stuff. So also a lot of these nurses came back and suffered from PTSD. I think 30% of them were diagnosed later with PTSD just because, I mean, even though they're not necessarily quote unquote in combat, they were there.
They were there. And let me tell you, I've seen things in my medical career that I will never not see. I walked into the bathroom where my guy overdosed the other day and like physically saw his body laying on the ground, not breathing. So you just imagine, I'm not seeing nearly what those nurses are seeing every single day.
Yeah, just the sense of duty as well of like, so you have your 12-month tours and it's such a catch-22. It's such a hard thing because you need to go home and get rest so that if you want to, you can do it again. But you're also leaving people like your friends, people your patients.
You built a whole life there in 12 months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess I read that it was really difficult the last 3 months where they were supposed to be transitioning out. It was really hard for them to do that because they're leaving, like I said, patients that they've been taking care of this whole time, friends that they have, and they're leaving them in a very dangerous, unsafe scenario and going home.
Yeah.
So that was really, really hard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bam. So women are awesome.
Well, nurses specifically, but
yeah. I mean, all women and nurses.
Yeah.
Both. After initial demonstration to Navy doctors, the valve was deployed experimentally in the field and then rapidly spread across medical units. While exact figures vary, historical accounts credit the device for saving hundreds of wounded American soldiers and even being used by North Vietnamese medical personnel. We weren't the only ones using it. So Vietnam didn't just see the new valve, it also saw refinement. So we talked about like standard tube sizes. So
standard, very large tube sizes.
Very big. Very big.
big.
Yep, to optimize drainage and fit various patients. Material improvement in the mid-20th century, introduction of plastic tubing made drainage safer and more flexible, reducing kinks and improved reliability. So you're not using like your PVC or your kind of like garden hose plastic tubing, which can kink and it requires the patient not to move.
Yes.
Right. And so
that's a big thing nowadays. Like patients, they're not going home with chest tubes in, but like they're walking around with chest tubes in. They have to carry it and be careful.
Yeah.
But they're ambulatory,
Yeah. And same thing for like evacuations. Right?
Yeah.
Being able to move. It's so much easier if a patient can walk onto the transportation as opposed to you having to carry them.
Yes. And safer. Yeah.
Exactly. So Vietnam, as we mentioned, lasted a long time, many, many years, and its medical lessons shaped trauma care worldwide. There was a huge reduction in mortality. The culture of rapid evacuation plus effective chest drainage resulted in significant lower mortality rates from thoracic trauma than earlier conflicts. And then it was also influenced in civilian practices. So techniques refined in the Vietnam War were later codified into civilian trauma care, influencing emergency medicine and trauma surgery long after the war ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, legacy of Vietnam chest drainage.
It was about damn time, but also how cool.
Yeah, exactly. Really, tube thoracostomy became the standard care for chest trauma.
Oh.
The Heimlich valve made battlefield drainage more practical and widespread. And then plastic one-way valves and portable systems laid the groundwork for modern chest drainage.
Yeah. Which is so cool because it is so similar to what we're using nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about chest tubes in Vietnam.
My favorite part of it, though, is the story of the nurses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. Also, we talked about C-140, but having helicopters also was a big deal because I was mentioning guerrilla warfare and we were deep in jungle territory, so there's no landing strips.
Yeah.
Being able to call medevacs and evacuate people in very tight spaces was also a big thing. But then you're in that tight space and a helicopter, I don't know if you guys know, is not very big.
No.
It's not very big unless you're flying a Chinook, but that's not going to fit where you want it to go. Right. Yeah. Most of the time, you can only fit so many people on there. Yeah. So if you're going to pick up someone who might be a casualty, like you have to have your supplies in there. You have to be able to fit them in there. And that's not going to work with some of these older items. And so if you need to place a chest tube while in flight, it has to be easy.
Yes.
It has to be safe.
Yes.
You have to be able to do it while things are like moving around.
Yeah. This is not a perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, even in the ER under emergencies, like we get to do it in a very controlled fashion,
Yeah.
Not flying around in the air.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think it's interesting how all of these inventions and timing just like
perfect
hit Vietnam War. But I will Vietnam was a long conflict. So it's not like it just like happened.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see the development of wound care while in life-saving measures with the development of transportation and evacuations. Yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit about that.
Yeah, super cool.
So
that closes the chapter on chest tubes for now.
So what do we have next?
Next, we have leprosy.
Which,
let me tell you, studying it made me question my entire practice, as it typically does. And also made me realize people suck, as they typically do.
Oh, yeah. Leprosy is one of those things that has a long history of stigma.
Yeah.
Even though, and we'll get into it.
We'll get into it.
Just listen. Listen.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. You can support us by following us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find links and all of the things in our show notes. And also in any of our bios, you can find our link tree, which gets you to anywhere you need to go. We are available on basically every podcast platform by this point.
Yeah, listen to where you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, wherever you get your podcasts. How fun is that to say? If you have any interest in starting a podcast, or you have questions, or you would like a Riverside subscription, that is something that we can help you with and get you a little bit cheaper for. So reach out to us about that. But you can also find our affiliate link in our show notes and on our link tree. And then continue to support us by leaving a review, commenting on our podcast, interacting with our social media posts, and sharing our podcast with people that you think will be really interested in it.
Yeah, we want more people to listen.
More people.
More. If you have an idea for an episode or case, please share that with us. We're always looking for new topics to cover on this show, and we want to do things that interest you. Also, if you have a story that you would like us to share on the podcast, we're hoping to put together an episode for that. So go ahead and send us those. With your permission, we'll share it here.
Perfect. And with that, class is dismissed.
Stay safe.
Stay curious.
And don't try this at home.
Unless you own a bone saw.
Bye.
But we already said no chest tubes.
No chest tubes.
Bye, guys. Have a good week. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We discuss the history of medicine, not your personal medical situation. Nothing you hear on this show should ever be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Some of the information discussed may be incorrect or become outdated over time. We do our best to stay current with medical knowledge, but medicine changes quickly. Additionally, because we do not work in every specific field we discuss, there may be times when we misspeak or misinterpret information. We're all human, and we're doing our best for the podcast. Every medical case is unique, and your health decisions should always be made in consultation with your own qualified healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about your health, please reach out to a licensed provider who can give you guidance based on your individual needs.